You won't believe how far this officer went when he dragged a pregnant black woman across a gas station parking lot. In this video, we reveal the shocking events that spiraled out of control and the powerful twist that turned the entire police department upside down. Stay until the end to see how one courtroom moment changed everything forever. It all started on a quiet Saturday morning in a small Georgia town called Hillcrest Grove. The sun was just beginning to rise over the tree-lined roads, the birds were chirping, and the world felt peaceful. But inside a local gas station, chaos was about to unfold in a way no one could have predicted. 32-year-old Danielle Taylor was 7 months pregnant. She was glowing with life, full of joy and excitement for her first child. Her husband, Judge Michael Taylor, had just left for a weekend legal conference upstate. Danielle decided to drive to the nearby gas station for some snacks and prenatal vitamins. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic, just a pregnant woman going about her day. As she pulled into the lot, she noticed a white police cruiser parked crooked across 2 spaces. She didn't think much of it. Danielle was used to seeing law enforcement in Hillcrest Grove. She parked her sedan in the open space next to the cruiser, got out slowly, and walked carefully toward the store. But inside that cruiser, Officer Ryan Caldwell was watching. He was a young white officer with only 2 years on the force, but he carried himself like a war general. He believed in showing dominance and believed that anyone who did not instantly show respect was a problem. Ryan watched Danielle exit her car. He saw a black woman with a hoodie and leggings. He saw her belly. But what he did not see was a threat. He saw a target. Danielle entered the store. She greeted the clerk with a smile, grabbed a bottle of water and a pack of trail mix, and walked to the counter. The store clerk, an older man named Louis, asked how far along she was. Danielle laughed and said she was counting down the weeks. She paid in cash and headed back out the door. That's when Officer Ryan Caldwell made his move. He stepped out of his cruiser, walked briskly toward her, and barked out a question that stunned her. "Why are you walking like that?" he asked. "You high or something?" Danielle paused. She looked at him in confusion. "Sir, I am just pregnant," she said. That answer triggered something in him. Maybe it was her tone, maybe it was her refusal to sound afraid, maybe it was just his own twisted sense of power. But without warning, Ryan told her to stop and put her hands behind her back. Danielle laughed nervously. "Excuse me," she asked. "You are resisting," he snapped. Danielle took a step back. "Sir, I did nothing wrong," she said. That was all it took. Ryan grabbed her by the wrist. Danielle screamed. He twisted her arm behind her back and yanked her forward. Her water bottle fell, the bag tore, trail mix spilled onto the pavement. "Stop resisting," he yelled. "I am pregnant," Danielle cried. "Please do not hurt my baby." Louis, the clerk inside, saw everything through the window. He ran outside, shouting at the officer to stop. But Ryan pushed Danielle down to her knees, then dragged her across the pavement toward his cruiser. "You want to act up in public, you gonna deal with the consequences," he growled. Danielle was sobbing. She could barely breathe. She was 7 months pregnant and terrified. As Ryan reached for his radio to call for backup, another voice cut through the chaos. "What in the world is going on here?" It was Sandra Blake, a middle-aged black woman who had just pulled into the lot. She had witnessed the last 30 seconds and could not believe what she was seeing. She pulled out her phone and began recording. "This woman is pregnant," Sandra said. "Let her go." Ryan turned toward her and shouted, "You better keep moving or you are going with her." That was all Sandra needed. She stayed where she was but kept the camera pointed. Danielle was now pressed against the hood of the cruiser. Her face was streaked with tears. Her belly was pressed against cold metal. She kept repeating the same words. "Please, I am pregnant. Please, I am pregnant." Sandra's voice was shaky as she spoke to the phone. "I do not know who this officer is, but I am at Maple gas station on Route 6, and he just threw a pregnant black woman on the hood of his car. Somebody needs to come now. Danielle whispered. My husband is a judge, please call Michael Taylor. But Ryan ignored her. He placed her in handcuffs and shoved her into the back of his cruiser. As he closed the door, he muttered, You people always think you are above the law. Sandra kept recording. Danielle was in pain, her stomach was tightening. She was scared she was going into early labor. She leaned her head against the window and whispered, God, please protect my baby. Ryan called in her license plate, but he never ran her name, he never asked for ID, he never read her any rights, he had all read. Y decided she was guilty of something. Louis the clerk was still shouting at him. You are gonna kill her, you fool, she is pregnant. Ryan told Louis to step back or be arrested. The entire parking lot had gone silent except for Sandra's voice and Danielle's sobs. By the time paramedics arrived 5 minutes later, the damage had already been done. Danielle was struggling to breathe. Her blood pressure was dangerously high, she was shaking. Ryan tried to block the paramedics. She is under arrest, he said. The paramedic in charge, a man named Thomas, pushed past him. I do not care if she robbed the bank down the street. She is pregnant and in distress, back off. Danielle was taken to Hillcrest Grove Memorial Hospital. Sandra followed the ambulance in her car. And the moment she arrived, she uploaded the video to her social media account. It went viral in under an hour. People across the city were horrified, but no one was more horrified than Judge Michael Taylor. He had just finished speaking at the legal conference when his phone exploded with calls. He opened his email, he saw the video. And for a long moment, he sat there in his hotel chair in total silence. Then he stood up. And everything changed from that moment on. Judge Michael Taylor had seen many horrors in his courtroom over the years, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for what he saw on that small phone screen inside his hotel room. It was his wife, his pregnant wife, Danielle. And she was being dragged across concrete like an animal. Michael stood frozen, his hands were shaking, he hit play again and the video repeated. The screams, the crying, the officer's voice yelling, the hood of the cruiser pressing against Danielle's belly, and then her words over and over again. I am pregnant, please do not hurt my baby. Michael's eyes narrowed. He shut the phone off, grabbed his coat, and walked to the elevator. This was no longer about law, this was personal. Back in Hillcrest Grove, the hospital had stabilized Danielle. Her vitals were strong, but her stress levels were dangerous. The nurses gently monitored her heartbeat and the baby's. Her doctor, Sheila Grant, stayed by her side the entire time. Danielle kept repeating one sentence. Please tell Michael I am okay. Sandra was sitting in the waiting room. She had her phone in hand and tears in her eyes. The video had been shared over 200,000 times already. People were commenting in real time. This is disgusting. Where are the protests? How is this legal? Michael burst through the hospital doors just after noon. His black suit was still crisp, but his face was thunder. Sandra stood up and introduced herself. I am the one who filmed it, sir. Your wife asked for you. Michael gave her a firm nod. Thank you for protecting her when I could not. Inside the hospital room, Danielle was resting, but her eyes lit up when Michael entered. He rushed to her side, kissed her hand, and whispered, I saw everything. I am going to make this right. Danielle tried to smile, but her face was swollen from crying. Her belly moved gently. The baby was okay, but the pain was far from over. Michael turned to the nurse. Did the officer say what he was arresting her for? The nurse shook her head. No, sir, he said she resisted, but she did not. She begged him. We saw the video, too. Michael stepped into the hallway and dialed a number. This is Judge Michael Taylor. I need the police chief at Hillcrest Grove Station. Now. Across town, at the Hillcrest Grove Police Department, Chief Leonard Briggs was halfway through a ham sandwich when his secretary buzzed in. Sir, Judge Taylor is on line 1. Leonard sat up. Patch him through. The phone clicked and Michael's voice came through cold and sharp. Leonard, this is not a social call. I saw what one of your officers did to my pregnant wife this morning. His name is Ryan Caldwell. He dragged her across a gas station lot like she was trash. 7 months pregnant Leonard. Leonard took a deep breath. Michael, let me look into it. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Michael's voice got even quieter. If that man is not suspended within the next hour, I will file a formal federal complaint with the Georgia Judicial Review Board. I will also notify the district attorney and open a personal civil rights case from my bench. Leonard's tone changed instantly. Understood, I will handle it. But Michael was not finished. And Leonard, if I find out you knew this officer had complaints before, you are done. The line went dead. Chief Leonard looked pale. He turned to his assistant. Call Caldwell in here now. Meanwhile, Danielle was moved to a private recovery suite. Michael stayed by her side. He did not cry, he did not panic, but his silence was powerful. Danielle squeezed his hand. You do not have to go to war for me, she said. Michael looked at her. War found us, I am just answering the door. Back at the station, Officer Ryan Caldwell walked in with his badge clipped and sunglasses. S on his collar, he was still smug, still cocky. He had no idea who Danielle was married to. Leonard stood from his desk. Ryan, you are suspended, effective immediately. Ryan laughed. For what? Arresting a shoplifter who got mouthy. Leonard threw a file across the desk. That was Judge Taylor's wife you manhandled. And she was not a shoplifter. She paid in cash. There are receipts. There is video. You messed up. Ryan's jaw dropped. She was lying. She resisted. Leonard shook his head. That woman was 7 months pregnant, and you dragged her face down in public. I got a judge calling the DA. I got media camped outside. You are lucky I do not fire you today. Ryan's voice trembled for the first time. You are suspending me over some video. Leonard pointed to the door. Get out and turn in your badge. Ryan stormed out. That night, every major network had the story. The viral video played on repeat. Civil rights leaders were speaking up. Activists were calling for charges. But the real pressure was coming from the legal world. Judge Michael Taylor was not an ordinary man. He had allies and he had reach. By morning, the mayor had released a statement. The governor's office issued a call for an internal investigation, and the police chief called for an emergency press conference. But Michael was not looking for apologies. He was building a case. Every medical bill, every bruise, every witness, every second of body cam footage. This was no longer about embarrassment, this was about justice. Danielle watched the coverage from her hospital bed. She held her belly and whispered to her unborn child. Your daddy is going to protect us, no matter what. Sandra visited her every day. You are a hero now, she told Danielle. Danielle shook her head. I did not want to be, I just wanted some water and a snack. But sometimes history does not ask you if you are ready. It just comes anyway. And this story was far from over. Because in the next 24 hours, the courtroom would become the battleground. And Officer Ryan Caldwell would learn what it truly meant to face justice. Face to face with the man whose wife he had brutalized. It was only 2 days later when Judge Michael Taylor walked into his own courtroom. The halls were quiet, but the tension hung like a storm waiting to break. Michael was not scheduled to preside over any cases that day, but this was not about scheduling. This was about message. This was about justice walking upright and unshaken into the same place where law had been twisted only days before. He adjusted his black robe and stepped behind the bench. The court is now in session. Sandra was sitting quietly in the back row of the gallery. She had never been in court before, but Danielle had asked her to attend. Beside her sat Danielle's sister, Monica, who held Danielle's purse and a copy of her medical discharge papers. Their presence wasn't for show. It was to remind the world that Danielle was not alone. The courtroom began to fill, reporters filed in, spectators whispered, and then came the unmistakable sound of cuffs clinking. Officer Ryan Caldwell was being escorted in. Still in uniform. Still smirking. But now his wrists were shackled, his badge was gone. He looked at the judge and instantly went pale. He recognized him. Michael Taylor. The husband. Caldwell turned to his court-appointed attorney. I want another judge. This is a conflict of interest. But the judge had already anticipated that. Michael cleared his throat and addressed the room. This preliminary hearing has been reviewed and reassigned. I will not preside as judge over my wife's case. However, as chief judicial officer in this district, I am here to oversee the lawful transfer and ensure all charges are read transparently before this court and public. A new judge, Honorable Susan Franklin, was already walking in through the side door. Michael stepped back. Judge Franklin sat tall, her voice calm but firm. We are here for the arraignment of Officer Ryan Caldwell on charges of aggravated assault, wrongful arrest, excessive use of force, obstruction of civil rights, and endangerment of an unborn child. Gasps filled the courtroom. Ryan's lawyer stood. Your Honor, we request dismissal. My client was performing his duties as a law enforcement officer and did not know the individual was pregnant at the time. Judge Franklin raised her brow. Are you referring to the same individual who said the words, I am pregnant 4 separate times on camera, while he continued to press her against the hood of his vehicle? The lawyer stammered. We believe the stress of the moment clouded judgment. Franklin's voice dropped. That may be for a jury to decide, but this court will not entertain dismissal today. Ryan's smirk faded fast. In the back of the room, Sandra reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She tapped record. She wanted the world to see what happened when justice finally stood its ground. The courtroom technician played the video on the evidence screen. He same one Sandra had filmed. Michael watched without blinking. Danielle's voice echoed through the chamber. Please, I am pregnant. You are hurting me. Franklin shook her head and turned to Ryan's. You are being remanded without bail pending investigation. Your prior complaints are under review, your badge is suspended, and you will wear an ankle monitor until further notice. Ryan turned red. He looked like he wanted to scream, but instead he cursed under his breath and stared down at the floor. Outside the courthouse, protesters had already gathered. Black mothers, veterans, church leaders, students. They all held signs. Justice for Danielle. Protect Black women. A pregnancy is not a crime. That evening, Michael and Danielle sat in their living room. The curtains were drawn. Their baby's ultrasound photo was pinned to the refrigerator. Michael rubbed Danielle's feet and looked her in the eyes. This is not over, you understand that. Danielle nodded. I know. He paused. This might get ugly. There are people who will say you provoked him, that you were suspicious, that you lied. Danielle's voice was steady. Let them, the truth is on our side. Michael leaned in and kissed her hand. I will never let them bury your story. By morning, Sandra's court footage had already hit 1 million views. Celebrities reposted it. Influencers shared it. Former officers even stepped forward to say Ryan Caldwell had a history of hostility. One said he once slammed a teenager's head against a patrol car for not having ID. Another said he mocked a woman who miscarried in his cruiser after a rough stop. Suddenly, Ryan was no longer just a cop. He was a symbol, a symptom of something deeper. But so was Danielle. And now she was fighting not just for herself, but for every woman who had ever been dehumanized while carrying life inside her. The district attorney, Arthur Miles, scheduled a press conference for the following week. Rumors swirled that Ryan might face federal charges, and that a deeper investigation into the Hillcrest Grove Police Department was underway. Meanwhile, Judge Susan Franklin assigned the case to a public court with full transparency. She requested live-streamed hearings and made all non-sensitive documents public record. Danielle's case had become a national moment. A mirror. And America was looking. At its police. At its courts. At its soul. And behind all the outrage stood one quiet, determined woman. A pregnant. A healing. A unbroken. The morning sun crept through the blinds of Danielle and Michael's home, casting a soft light across their living room. It had been 4 days since the courtroom bombshell. 4 days since Officer Ryan Caldwell had been dragged in front of Judge Susan Franklin and remanded without bail. But the storm was only beginning. That morning, Danielle sat quietly at the kitchen table with a cup of peppermint tea in hand. Her body still ached from the bruises. Her belly, now visibly rounder, moved slightly as the baby kicked. Michael watched her from the kitchen sink. You okay? Danielle nodded softly. Just thinking about what happens next. Before Michael could reply, his phone rang. Unknown caller. He hesitated, then answered. This is Michael. A deep voice spoke on the other end. Judge Taylor, this is Special Agent Theodore Benson with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division. We're reaching out to you and your wife directly. We'd like to schedule an in-home visit. Michael's eyes narrowed. What is this about? Your wife's case has triggered a review into systemic abuse within Hillcrest Grove Police Department. We believe Officer Caldwell may not be acting alone. Michael's grip on the phone tightened. When? We're on the way now. We'll be there in 15 minutes. Danielle looked up from her tea, eyes locked on Michael's. Who was that? Federal Agents, Civil Rights Division. Danielle's breath caught. They're coming here. Michael nodded. They think this goes deeper than just Ryan Caldwell. 15 minutes later, a black SUV parked discreetly outside their home. 2 men and 1 woman stepped out, all wore suits, all carried briefcases, and all had serious, deliberate faces. Michael met them at the door. Agent Benson extended his hand. Judge Taylor, Mrs. Taylor, thank you for meeting with us. Danielle invited them inside. The agent sat up at the dining table, pulling out files, a laptop, and what looked like a portable recording device. Benson leaned forward. We are here off the record, at least for now. What we need from you is everything, every detail, every interaction, every instinct you had during that stop. Danielle took a deep breath and began. She described the initial turn signal, the flashing lights, the aggressive tone, the demand to get out, the sharp pain in her wrists, her cries about the baby, the pressure on her abdomen, the cold hood of the car, the laughter, the threat. She didn't cry. Not once. Agent Benson listened in silence. His jaw clenched slightly when she described being called. Liar. When she explained how Officer Caldwell ignored her medical bracelet, the female agent beside him scribbled something in all caps. Then Benson opened his folder and slid a photo across the table. Danielle blinked. That is Officer Travis Hodges, Caldwell's former partner. 2 complaints were filed against them last year for excessive force during traffic stops. One case involved a black mother with her son in the car. The second was buried. We are reopening both. Michael leaned forward. You believe they were targeting women. We believe they were targeting women of color, particularly those who were alone and vulnerable. Danielle looked down. So this wasn't random. Benson's voice was calm. We do not believe so. That's why we need your help and your testimony. Danielle nodded. I will testify whatever it takes. The agents left with copies of the court video, Danielle's hospital report, and a full statement. Before leaving, Agent Benson paused at the door. There are some people in this town who won't like what we're doing. They'll say this is a witch hunt. They'll say this is about revenge. But it's about rights, it's about truth, and we intend to uncover all of it. That night, the story hit the national news. CNN, NBC, Obed. Even local conservative outlets. Pregnant woman dragged by Officer Sparks' federal probe. Michael turned off the TV and sat beside Danielle on the couch. He looked at her, then at her stomach. Our baby is already making history. Danielle smiled softly. Let's hope she never has to fight this hard just to be believed. The next day, Michael received an email from the State Judicial Review Board. They wanted to know if he had any interest in sitting on a special task force, one that would look into judicial oversight of police brutality cases. A seat had opened, and they wanted him. Michael closed the laptop slowly and looked over at Danielle. Oh, you think I should do it? Oh, she didn't hesitate. Yes, laid from the front. He smiled. You know I love you, right? Danielle laughed gently. You better. You married a woman willing to go to war with her baby bump. Michael chuckled and hugged her tight. Meanwhile, at Hillcrest Grove PD, changes were already rippling through the station. Captain Gerald Morris, the man who had once ignored Danielle's complaint, had been placed on administrative leave. 2 officers were suspended. A new interim chief was brought in from the next district. And quietly, an anonymous letter was leaked to the press. It accused several officers of covering up misconduct, of deleting body cam footage, of intimidating victims into silence. No one knew who sent it. But Danielle had a good guess. It might have been someone inside who had finally had enough. As days turned into a week, the town of Hillcrest Grove changed. Murals appeared overnight downtown. One showed Danielle with her arms raised, shielding her belly with the words, She spoke. We listened. Never again. Churches started hosting community protection forums. One pastor said during a sermon, This woman did not just carry a child, she carried a movement. And through it all, Danielle remained calm. She refused to be bitter. She refused to be small. Even when hate mail started arriving. Even when online trolls tried to twist the story. She stayed focused. She stayed strong. And she never, ever stopped believing that justice was coming. 3 days after the federal agents left their home, Danielle and Michael received an encrypted email. It came from a woman named Rachel Monroe. A subject line said, I know what Officer Caldwell did. I saw it happen before. Michael read it twice, then turned to Danielle's. This woman says she used to work the front desk at Hillcrest Grove Police Department. She wants to meet. She says it's urgent. Danielle rubbed her stomach, eyes narrowed. Do you trust her? Michael replied. She gave a burner number, no name at the end. But if what she says is true, this could change everything. They decided to be cautious. The next morning, they met her in the side room of a public library 15 minutes outside Hillcrest Grove. It was a quiet corner, neutral ground, no cameras, no police. Rachel Monroe arrived wearing dark glasses and a hoodie, mid-30s, nervous hands. She sat down, clutching a small USB drive. She wasted no time. I was the desk clerk for 4 years. I processed complaints. I logged officer reports. I watched what happened when someone filed a use of force complaint. Danielle sat still. And what happened? Rachel glanced around, lowered her voice. They were erased, edited, buried. Michael leaned in. By who? Rachel's eyes darkened. Internal affairs, but it wasn't just them. Sergeant Brunner, Captain Morris, sometimes even the officers themselves. They would walk in, delete bodycam footage, laugh about it in the break room. Danielle's voice was tight. And Caldwell. Rachel nodded. He was one of the worst. He and Officer Hodges made a game of it. They had a whiteboard with names, nicknames, descriptions. I thought it was some kind of code until I saw what it really was. Michael frowned. What? Targets, black women, mothers, nurses, people they thought couldn't fight back. Rachel slid the USB across the table. There's footage, files, copies of deleted complaints I saved on my own drive. I knew one day someone would come along who would need to see it. Danielle picked it up slowly. Why now? Rachel hesitated. Because you survived, because they did this to a pregnant woman and thought no one would care, but they were wrong. Michael's voice was firm. Will you testify? Rachel swallowed. I'll do it, but I'll need protection. These people don't play fair. Michael nodded. We can get you a meeting with the federal team. You'll be protected, I promise. Rachel looked at Danielle. You're brave. I wish I'd been brave sooner. Danielle gave a soft smile. Bravery is doing the right thing even when it's hard, and you're doing it now. That night, the USB contents were reviewed by Agent Benson and his team. They were stunned. Hidden audio files of Caldwell mocking victims. Redacted reports with missing timestamps. Witness statements that had never been submitted to court. And then came the video that changed everything. A clip of Officer Caldwell dragging a young black woman from her car in the parking lot of a grocery store. She screamed that she was disabled. He laughed and told her she was faking it. Michael watched the video from the kitchen table and shook his head. How did this man wear a badge for so long? Agent Benson replied, because no one with power ever stood up to him until now. The next morning, subpoenas were issued. Captain Gerald Morris was called back to give a deposition. Sergeant Brunner resigned before the ink dried. And 2 more officers were quietly suspended. Rachel Monroe entered federal protection. And for the first time in weeks, Danielle felt something shift. The weight of silence was breaking. She walked into her living room that evening, looking at the news on the television. Her face was on the screen again, this time with a headline that said, Whistleblower comes forward in pregnant woman police case. Below that was a short quote from her own court statement. I may be carrying a child, but I am also carrying a truth this world needs to hear. Danielle turned off the TV and sat on the edge of her bed. She closed her eyes and placed both hands over her belly. I'm doing this for you, little one. You will grow up in a world where your mother stood tall. The next day, her phone buzzed with a message from Agent Benson. A new witness, a key figure, ready to testify. Danielle looked at the names. It was someone unexpected. A rookie officer, one who had once trained under Caldwell, he had something he needed to say, something he couldn't carry anymore. Michael looked over her shoulder. Looks like this case is far from over. Danielle smiled softly. Good, let's finish what they started. The federal courthouse in Atlanta was unusually crowded for a Tuesday. Danielle sat beside Michael in the observation gallery, her hand lightly resting on her belly. Her eyes locked on the young man walking slowly to the witness stand. He looked barely over 23, hair neatly trimmed, uniform stiff with formality, nervous but determined. His name was Officer Brian Ellis. He had served under Officer Caldwell for 9 months. Assistant U.S. Attorney Valerie Green stepped forward. Officer Ellis, thank you for agreeing to testify. Please tell the court your relationship to Officer Caldwell. Ellis cleared his throat. I was assigned as his junior partner during my probationary period. I rode with him every day, watched him work, listened to everything he said. I was supposed to learn from him. Valerie nodded. What did you learn? Ellis hesitated. How to profile black drivers. How to lie on bodycam reports. How to make arrests stick even when there was no reason to arrest. Gasps murmured through the courtroom. Michael gripped Danielle's hand tighter. She didn't blink. Valerie continued. Did you ever see Officer Caldwell use excessive force? Ellis lowered his head. Yes, more than once. Can you describe the first incident you witnessed? He took a breath. We pulled over a black father in a minivan, 2 kids in the back, no reason except he had a missing license plate screw. Caldwell told me to write him up for resisting, even though the man was calm, said we needed the stats. When I hesitated, Caldwell said, and I quote, black drivers give us the numbers we need. Danielle's eyes darkened, Michael's jaw tightened. Valerie pressed further. Why are you coming forward now? Ellis looked at Danielle. Because of her, because I saw what happened that day in the gas station footage, and because I know it was wrong. He paused, then added, and because my younger sister is pregnant, if someone did that to her, I'd never forgive myself for staying quiet. Danielle's eyes filled with tears. Valerie turned to the judge. Your Honor, we request this testimony be submitted as key corroborating evidence for federal civil rights violations. Judge Thompson nodded solemnly. So entered into record. The defense attorney stood up, a man in his late 50s with silver hair and a tired voice. Officer Ellis, isn't it true you never filed a complaint until now? Correct, I was scared. And you're testifying now only because you were promised immunity. Ellis looked directly at the jury. I was promised a chance to tell the truth. That's more important than immunity. Murmurs spread again. Valerie stepped in. No further questions. We thank Officer Ellis for his courage. As Ellis stepped down, Danielle leaned in and whispered to Michael. That young man might have just saved this entire case. Michael nodded. And maybe even his own soul. The courtroom cleared for recess. Outside, reporters swarmed the steps, cameras flashed, questions flew. Danielle stood still, letting Michael answer most of them. Then one journalist asked, Danielle, what does justice look like to you now? She answered without hesitation. Justice is not just punishing the guilty, it's protecting the next person they might have hurt. It's making sure this system sees us as human. The crowd went quiet for a moment. Then someone clapped, then others joined. That night, Ellis's testimony aired on every major network. He was hailed as a rare voice of accountability inside the force. Danielle received dozens of letters from mothers, from activists, even from retired police officers who said, We wish we had done what Ellis did when we had the chance. But the battle was not over. Caldwell was still denying everything. And more disturbing, his legal team filed a motion claiming that Danielle resisted arrest and endangered her unborn child. They were trying to shift blame. Michael slammed the folder on the table at home. They are turning this into her fault again. Danielle remained calm. Let them try, because now we have evidence, we have testimony, and we have truth. Michael smiled. And we have something they never expected. What's that? Are you? Danielle tilted her head. What do you mean? Michael pulled out a file. I was contacted by a special legal team that represents victims of racial discrimination. They're helping us sue the department in federal civil court, not just for damages, but for reform. Danielle sat up. So it's not just about Caldwell anymore. Michael nodded. We're going after the whole rotten tree. Danielle stood and looked out the window. Then let's get ready. Because I'm done being afraid. The morning sun was just rising over Atlanta when Michael opened the front door and found an envelope taped to it. No postage, no name, just the department seal pressed into the paper like a warning. He carried it to the kitchen where Danielle was making tea. What's that? He sliced it open, pulled out 2 sheets. His eyes moved quickly, then slowly, then stopped. Danielle stepped forward. Michael. He looked up. They filed an internal memorandum. They are accusing you of assaulting the officers. They say you interfered with an active arrest and endangered a federal investigation. Danielle stared at him. You weren't even near me, you showed up afterwards. Michael nodded. They are lying, and worse than that, they included an edited video. Danielle took the pages from his hand. The footage had timestamps, but portions were blurred out, audio muted, bodycam footage that somehow never caught the moment she was thrown down, never caught the yelling, only showed Danielle standing outside the gas station, then cut to her on the ground with officers over her. This is a cover-up. Michael nodded. It is a clean one, too. They doctored the record, just enough to cast doubt, just enough to protect themselves. Danielle sat slowly. So what do we do now? Michael tapped the table. We prove it's fake, we get the full video from the gas station cameras, we show what really happened. Danielle looked at him. And if they destroyed that footage? Michael's jaw tightened. Then we find witnesses, eyewitnesses, there were people there, someone saw something, someone filmed something. And just like that, their fight took a new direction. They drove back to the gas station. It had been weeks since that awful night, but everything looked the same. The pumps, the overhang, even the chalk mark still faintly on the concrete where Danielle had fallen. The store owner, an older man named Frank, came out from behind the counter. His eyes widened. You came back. Danielle nodded. We need your help. Frank waved them inside. Once behind the plexiglass, he whispered, I never erased the footage. Michael blinked. What? Frank tapped a hard drive behind the register. After what I saw those cops do to you, I saved a copy, but I didn't tell anyone, I didn't trust them, especially after one of them came back asking for it. Oh, Frank paused. The older one, red face, thin lips, kept tapping his badge on the counter like it meant something. Caldwell. Frank nodded. Oh, he said it was sensitive, that. It was being handled. I smiled, said I'd check the system, then made a duplicate and gave him a dummy file. Danielle nearly cried. You don't know what this means. Frank handed over the hard drives. It means you're going to win. Michael squeezed his shoulder. Thank you. Back home, they loaded the footage onto Michael's laptop. There it was, clear as daylight. Danielle standing at pump 4, not blocking traffic, not aggressive. Two officers approach, no warning. Caldwell grabs her by the arm, spins her around, throws her down. No resisting, no threats, no crime. Danielle looked away. I cannot watch this again. Michael closed the lid. We don't need to, we have what we need. That night, their attorney Valerie reviewed the footage. Her eyes were ice by the end. This changes everything. She prepared a motion to submit the unedited gas station footage into federal court as Exhibit A. 2 days later, it was filed. The judge reviewed it in chambers and called for an emergency hearing. Caldwell's legal team went silent for 3 hours. Then they made their next move. A counter-narrative. They called in a press conference with a former chief of police who claimed that what the footage showed was reasonable use of force. Danielle watched the broadcast on her phones. The former chief said, given the officer's assessment of danger and his prior knowledge of the suspect's behavior, his actions were within policy. Danielle laughed. So now I'm a suspect. Michael turned the phone off. They are doubling down, that means we hit a nerve. And they were right. That week, a confidential leak came through a legal contact. An internal email chain between officers had been discovered. Emails showing Caldwell had been warned by Internal Affairs multiple times, complaints filed, evidence ignored, civilian videos buried. They had the emails. They had the footage. And they had Officer Ellis. But Caldwell still walked free. And the department still stood behind him. Michael slammed the car door after another court session. They are stalling, hoping it will all blow over. Danielle looked at him. Then let's blow it open. Michael raised an eyebrow. Oh. Danielle opened her phone, tapped into her social media account. She uploaded the gas station footage. She added only 3 words. This was me. It went viral in 6 hours. By midnight, major news outlets picked it up. Hashtags trended across platforms. Celebrities shared it. Politicians condemned it. And now the world knew. They had tried to erase the truth. But Danielle made sure it could never be erased again. 3 days after Danielle posted the gas station footage online, the city of Atlanta found itself in the eye of a storm it could no longer ignore. Reporters camped outside police headquarters. Protesters marched from Centennial Park to City Hall. The governor's office issued a brief statement calling for calm, but the people were not calm, they were wide awake. Inside her home, Danielle sat on the couch with her phone in her lap, watching the numbers rise. 20 million views, 400,000 shares, 800,000 comments. Every major outlet from CNN to local stations had reached out for interviews, but she declined them all. I don't want a spotlight, I want justice. Michael nodded from the kitchen table. And that is exactly what they are afraid of. That morning, the mayor held a press conference in front of a row of tightly packed flags. Her voice was steady, but her eyes told the real story. The footage recently shared on social media is deeply disturbing. I have personally watched the video and have instructed the Atlanta Police Department to launch an immediate internal review. We will cooperate with federal authorities in this matter. Let me be clear, no one is above the law, not even those who wear a badge. Danielle and Michael watched the full statement. When it ended, Michael turned to her. As she knows the pressure is on, she is trying to stay ahead of the fallout. Danielle leaned back. What happens now? Michael stood up and grabbed his briefcase. Now we go public on our own terms. Later that day, the couple sat across from Valerie, their lawyer, in a private office. A small recording team from a trusted independent news outlet had been called in. No makeup, no edits, just truth. The interviewer leaned forward. Danielle, can you tell us what went through your mind when you were thrown to the ground that night? Danielle paused, her voice didn't shake, her words were calm, but every syllable cut like a blade. I thought I lost the baby, I thought I was going to die, and I thought no one would care, because they saw my skin before they saw me. Michael reached for her hand. The interview went on for 40 minutes, every answer precise, every moment honest. When it aired that night, people wept in their homes, people marched in the streets, and most of all, people demanded answers. The next morning, Valerie's phone rang. It was the mayor's office. They want to meet Priva. I'll tell you today. Danielle raised an eyebrow. Why now? Michael folded his arms. Because the world is watching. That afternoon, they entered City Hall through a back entrance. Escorted by security, the mayor stood at the head of a polished conference table with 4 aides sitting beside her. Thank you for coming. Danielle took a seat without speaking. The mayor cleared her throat. Let me begin by saying what happened to you was unacceptable. I have ordered a temporary suspension for Officer Caldwell and his partner pending further investigation. But we want to do more. We want to be part of the solution. Michael narrowed his eyes. To define more. The mayor hesitated. We want to create a civilian oversight task force for use of force cases, and we want Danielle to serve on it. Danielle blinked. The mayor nodded. You are the face of this moment, but you are also its conscience. We need that. We need your voice at the table. Danielle looked at Michael, then back at the mayor's. Only if this task force has real power. Subpoena power, independent investigators, not just some photo op. The mayor leaned forward. That is exactly what I want to. It felt like progress. But outside the walls of that room, darker plans were already in motion. Back at the precinct, Caldwell sat in a briefing room surrounded by his union lawyers. His suspension had been announced, his image was all over the news, and his arrogance had curdled into rage. They are making me the face of this. His lawyer leaned back. You made yourself the face when you tossed that woman like she was trash. Caldwell slammed his fist on the table. I followed protocol, she disrespected me. The lawyer pointed at the screen. You went viral, that's what matters, you are a liability now. Caldwell sneered. I will not be sacrificed to make her look like a hero. And as the city tried to heal, Caldwell began building something in the shadows. Connections, favors, pulling strings with people who owed him. Quiet meetings with powerful men who still believed that law and order meant protecting their own. Back at home, Danielle tried to rest, but sleep would not come. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. You should have stayed quiet. She sat up, showed it to Michael. He took a screenshot, sent it to Valerie. Michael paced the room. This is not over, they are scared now, desperate. Danielle stood. Then let them be scared, I will not be silent. The next day, the mayor announced the official formation of the new task force with Danielle at its helm. A televised signing ceremony took place. Her name was now tied to real reform. But as Danielle walked back to her car after the press event, she noticed a black sedan idling at the curb. The windows were tinted. It followed her for 2 blocks before turning off. She said nothing to Michael that night, but she double-checked the locks before going to bed. What they did not know was that Officer Caldwell had already started working on a plan that would shake the courtroom to its core. And what came next would test every part of Danielle's faith, her marriage, and her resolve. Weeks passed, and the courtroom was where all eyes had turned. What had once been a quiet case in the background of the city's chaos had exploded into a battle for justice that no one could ignore. Danielle and Michael sat side by side, each feeling the weight of what was at stake. The courtroom was packed, cameras from local stations and reporters from national networks lined the benches. Outside, the crowd was growing, waving signs with slogans like "Justice for Danielle" and "Hold cops accountable." Their voices echoed, but inside it was quiet. The tension was palpable. At the front of the room, Officer Caldwell sat stone-faced, his lawyer next to him. Across from them, Danielle's legal team was ready, but Valerie's eyes kept darting to the door. There was something in the air, something they couldn't quite place. Judge Thompson entered, and the room fell silent. He sat at his bench and adjusted his glasses. This was it, the day that would change everything. Danielle had prepared herself for the long haul, but even now, she felt a rising unease in her chest. The case started with Caldwell's defense team presenting their arguments. They claimed that the video footage, though shocking, didn't tell the full story. They argued that Caldwell had acted in self-defense after Danielle's supposed resistance. They presented new evidence, a fabricated report that suggested Danielle had been verbally aggressive. The crowd in the courtroom murmured, but it was clear that the defense's attempt to paint Danielle as the aggressor wasn't convincing anyone. Still, the defense had one powerful ally, the mayor's office. They had been trying to spin the case from the start, positioning Caldwell as a victim of public opinion rather than a perpetrator. And now, their efforts were starting to show. Then Danielle's attorney, Valerie, stood up. She walked calmly to the podium. Her voice was steady, but there was a sharpness to it, a tone that promised they would not back down. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, "I want you to listen very carefully to the footage. The full footage, not the parts edited by the police department, but the footage from the gas station's security cameras. Watch closely." She clicked a remote, and the footage began to play once again. The same footage that had ignited the viral firestorm. The video where Officer Caldwell was seen throwing Danielle to the ground with no provocation. But then something unexpected happened. The defense team objected. "Objection," the defense attorney shouted. "This video has already been presented as evidence and should not be played again." The judge raised an eyebrow, his gavel ready. "Sustained, the jury will disregard this video," the judge ordered, slamming the gavel down. Danielle's heart sank. How could they disregard the very piece of evidence that proved the truths? But Valerie wasn't done. She turned to the judge with determination. "Your Honor," she said, "I would like to present a new piece of evidence. This is an unedited recording from the gas station surveillance system. The footage shows the entire encounter from a different angle. It has not been tampered with. It shows the truth." She handed over the hard drives. The defense protested, but the judge looked at the new evidence and made a decision. "We'll adjourn for a moment while this new evidence is reviewed." The courtroom buzzed as the judge stepped out. The crowd grew anxious, and Danielle squeezed Michael's hand. "Is this it?" Michael whispered, his voice tense. "I don't know," Danielle replied, "but it's all we have." In the quiet, they waited. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours. The judge returned after a short while, and the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. "I have reviewed the new evidence," he said, his voice booming in the silence. "The footage will be accepted into the record. The jury will be instructed to view it carefully before rendering their verdict." The defense was caught off guard. They tried to argue, but the judge overruled them. The footage began to play, and this time there was no hiding the truth. Caldwell's actions were exposed for what they truly were: an abuse of power, a deliberate attempt to harm a woman who had done nothing but ask for respect. Danielle's eyes never left the screen. She watched as the officers came into view, heard the sound of her own voice crying out in pain, and saw the moment when Caldwell, his face twisted with rage, threw her to the ground. She had been right all along. The truth had finally been laid bare. But even as victory seemed within their grasp, a new wave of anxiety washed over her. What if it wasn't enough? What if they would find a way to twist this too? And that was when the real trap was set. At the last moment, just as the jury was about to deliberate, a witness appeared. A police officer from another precinct, someone who had been brought in at the last second by the defense. He took the stand looking nervous, but his testimony was carefully crafted. He claimed that the video footage had been doctored, that the footage had been edited after the fact to make Caldwell look guilty, and he pointed to specific moments in the video, moments that seemed suspiciously convenient for the defense. Danielle's stomach dropped. The trap had been laid. The defense was pulling every trick in the book to discredit the evidence. But they had one advantage, one that the defense couldn't manipulate. The public was watching, and the public was not going to forget. The courtroom had been rocked by the sudden twist. A surprise witness had just testified that the video evidence might have been tampered with. The defense team wore smug expressions. Danielle and Michael, however, sat frozen. It felt like the truth had been twisted yet again right in front of them. But while the courtroom boiled in silence, something else was happening outside. The people were not staying quiet. As soon as the fake testimony hit the news, public fury exploded. Across every social media platform, people were posting side-by-side comparisons of the original viral video and the so-called doctored version. Influencers, legal experts, and independent video analysts began pointing out the inconsistencies in the defense's narrative. They broke the video down frame by frame. The truth became clearer and clearer. This was not a manipulation, this was justice in motion, and now the public was demanding more than just justice. They wanted accountability. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had swelled into the thousands. The protesters were not just shouting now, they were organized. They had signs, megaphones, and loudspeakers. News helicopters hovered above as chants filled the air. "I'll say her name. Danielle Parker. I'll say her name. Danielle Parker." Meanwhile, inside the courtroom, Danielle's legal team was working non-stop to discredit the sudden testimony from the defense's surprise witness. Valerie was relentless. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "we believe this witness has been coerced into offering false testimony. We request that he be questioned under oath with independent counsel present. We also have an independent video analyst ready to testify regarding the authenticity of the footage." The judge paused. His eyes darted toward the jury, then toward the growing tension beyond the courtroom doors. He could hear the chanting even through the thick walls. "The court will reconvene tomorrow," he finally said. "Until then, all evidence and witness testimonies will be reviewed in chambers." As court adjourned for the day, Danielle and Michael were led out by security. Reporters shouted questions. Protesters reached out just to touch her hand. Strangers were crying in the streets. Some held signs with pictures of her bruised face beside the words, "We believe you." That night, Danielle could not sleep. She watched the footage again and again, feeling everything all over. But now she wasn't crying, she was preparing. By morning, the city had changed. Local radio and TV shows were flooded with callers. Journalists who had once hesitated now stood firmly behind Danielle. Even public officials began releasing careful statements of support, afraid of being on the wrong side of history. Then, just before court resumed, the biggest twist dropped. A whistleblower came forward. His name was Thomas Graham, a technician from inside the police department's evidence management team. He contacted Valerie's office anonymously at first, saying he had information that would prove crucial. They arranged a private meeting, and what he revealed shook them to their core. Thomas explained that the supposed edits on the footage were planted by someone inside the department. He had the logs. He had the login records. He had screenshots of internal emails showing that the footage was intentionally altered after the original went viral. He had also backed up the department's untouched original file before it was changed. Danielle sat across from him, stunned. "Why are you doing this now?" she asked. "Because I saw what they did to you, and I couldn't sleep since then," he said. "My wife is pregnant. I kept imagining it was her on that ground." Valerie immediately moved to get Thomas placed under protection. By the time court resumed, everything was set. When the judge entered and the proceedings began, Valerie requested to call a new witness to the stand. Judge Thompson looked surprised but allowed it. Thomas Graham stepped forward. The defense objected, but the judge overruled them. "Let him speak." Thomas took the stand. He introduced himself, explained his role in the department, and then began laying out the facts. "Your Honor, I am here today because I have proof that the video footage entered by the defense was not the original. The original was altered, and I can show you how." He provided logs, records, screenshots, and forensic data. The courtroom watched, stunned, as everything the defense had said began to collapse. When Valerie asked him why he came forward, he said it again. "Because I saw that woman being brutalized, and then I watched my department lie to cover it up. I couldn't stay quiet." The courtroom was completely still. Even the defense team looked shaken. The judge called for a recess, but the damage was already done. Outside, the crowd had grown louder. Inside, Danielle sat with tears in her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were something else. A hope. This time, the people had refused to look away. This time, the truth had found its way to the light. But the verdict was still to come, and no one knew how it would fall. Michael leaned close to her. "No matter what happens next, you already changed the world," he whispered. She squeezed his hand. "And I am not done yet," she replied. The next day would bring the jury's decision, but what came next was something no one could have predicted. The courthouse was quiet in the early mornings, but everyone knew it would not stay that way. Today was verdict day. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy. The jury had spent the entire night deliberating. Their silence spoke louder than words. Danielle sat between Michael and Valerie. Her hands were clasped in prayer. She whispered to herself over and over again, not because she doubted the truth, but because she feared how powerful forces might still twist that truth. Outside, the protesters were back, larger than ever. News outlets from across the country had swarmed the courthouse. They all wanted the same thing: to know if the system would finally do the right thing. At exactly 10:15 in the morning, the bailiff opened the courtroom doors. "All rise." The judge entered and nodded toward the jury. "Have you reached a verdict?" The jury forewoman, a black woman named Angela Sanders, stood with a folded slip of paper in her hand. She looked directly at Danielle as she spoke. "We have, Your Honor." Angela handed the paper to the bailiff, who brought it to the judge. Judge Thompson unfolded it, scanned the words, and then looked at the room. His face remained unreadable. He handed the paper back. "You may read the verdict." Angela cleared her throat and began. In the matter of State of Georgia versus officers Richard Evans and Brian Cutter on the charges of excessive force, evidence tampering, false reporting, and attempted obstruction of justice, we the jury find both defendants guilty on all counts. The silence only lasted half a second, then it broke open like a wave. Gasps, cries, shouts of joy, people sobbed in the gallery, reporters scrambled to capture every moment. Valerie clutched Danielle's shoulder tightly. Michael stood up and hugged his wife. She broke down in his arms. Outside the building, the crowd had already begun to celebrate. The news spread in seconds. The chant that had filled the streets for days now turned into celebration. I'll say her name. Danielle Parker. I'll say her name. Danielle Parker. Back inside the courtroom, the officers stood frozen. Their legal team was stunned. Judge Thompson turned to them. Sentencing will be scheduled within the week. Officers Evans and Cutter are hereby remanded into custody. The courtroom erupted again. Officers rushed in to place the two men in handcuffs. As they were led away, Danielle watched them closely. There was no hatred in her eyes, just quiet justice. After the courtroom cleared, Danielle was taken outside. The crowd saw her and a roar rose that shook the pavement. She stepped up to the microphone, cameras flashing all around her. She took a breath, looked out into a sea of faces. Some white, some black, all united in one cause. "Thank you," she began. "Thank you for standing with me when I could not stand. Thank you for fighting with me when I was too weak to fight. This was never just about me. This was about all of us." Oh, the crowd cheered. Oh, she continued. "We are not done because there are more stories like mine, more women who are silenced, more men who are dragged and disrespected. This time, justice knocked down the door, but next time we should not even need a trial, we need change, and we will not stop until we get it." She stepped back, the crowd applauded like thunder, even reporters were clapping. People were hugging strangers. It felt like history was being written right in front of their eyes. Michael stood proudly behind her. Valerie wiped her eyes. They had all gone through hell together, but they had made it out. Later that night, Danielle sat on her porch with Michael. No cameras, no lights, just the two of them. "I feel like I can breathe again," she whispered. He wrapped an arm around her shoulder. "You did more than survive, you made sure others would too." In that quiet moment, a single text came through to her phone. It was from Thomas Graham. "Thank you for being brave enough to speak the truth. You gave me the courage to do the same." Danielle stared at the message. "This is not over," she said. "It's just the beginning." But even as the city celebrated, something was stirring in the background. Someone had been watching the entire trial from the shadows, and they were not happy. Because what Danielle did had exposed more than just two officers. She had cracked open a system. And those hiding in the cracks were ready to strike back. What came next would test everything Danielle thought she had won. Because this victory had drawn powerful enemies into the light. The day after the verdict, while the city buzzed with celebrations and national news declared a new era of accountability, something dark began to stir behind closed doors. In a dimly lit office deep inside a state administrative building, 4 men gathered around a mahogany table. They were not dressed in uniforms, but they wore the badge of power. State security consultants, former intelligence officers, political fixers. Their identities were unknown to most of the public. Their job was simple: contain fallout. The room was tense, no one smiled. One man, older, his voice gravelly from years of bourbon and secrets, finally broke the silence. "We told them this would happen if they let her testify." Another leaned forward, his fingers steepled together. The judge embarrassed them, the officers flipped, and now the entire operation is exposed. A third, a younger man in a crisp blue suit, scrolled through footage on his tablet. This woman, Danielle Parker, is everywhere. Morning shows, internet articles, youth groups are using her story, churches are preaching it from the pulpit. If we do not act now, we lose control. The older man nodded slowly. "Then it is time to activate Phase 3. They all turned toward the door. A fifth person entered, a woman, blonde, sharp eyes. She placed a single folder on the table and spoke with calm precision. "Target identified, pressure points mapped. We begin with her husband." Outside in the real world, Danielle was unaware of the storm building. She had started a foundation that very morning, the Parker Justice Project. Its goal was to provide legal and financial help to victims of police abuse. Donations were pouring in. Celebrities were endorsing her. Journalists were requesting interviews around the clock. Michael returned to work only to find his courtroom office had been mysteriously ransacked, files missing, laptop erased, nothing stolen, just cleared. He reported it immediately, but within hours, a story hit the web. Michael Parker under investigation for misconduct. And it was false, clearly, but it spread like fire. Danielle confronted the station behind the report, but they refused to remove it, claiming anonymous sources. Valerie, watching from her office at the mayor's office, slammed her phone down. She had seen this play before. This was the machine at work. Later that night, Danielle received a call. It was from Thomas Graham. His voice was shaky. Danielle, I was just told to withdraw all internal affairs complaints linked to the officers in your case. They threatened to reassign me to a traffic division in a rural county if I don't comply. This thing is deeper than we thought. Danielle sat in silence. She realized then. The system was fighting back. And it was fighting dirty. She looked at Michael, who was holding their son asleep in his arms. They won the battle, but the war had just begun. The next morning, she received a subpoena. Not for her case, but for a new investigation against her husband. Someone had planted evidence. Emails, bank transfers, phone records. It was a classic takedown, discredit the woman by smearing the man. Danielle called Valerie in tears. Valerie said firmly, "We fight back, we hire the best lawyer in the country." And that is exactly what they did. In flew Richard Calloway, a legal bulldog from Chicago, known for ripping federal prosecutors apart in court. He wore cowboy boots in the courtroom and carried a single fountain pen. The first thing he said was, "They picked the wrong couple to mess with." Calloway uncovered that not only were the allegations baseless, but that they had been constructed from within a hidden task force funded by a secret account inside the Department of Public Safety. The deeper he dug, the more faces he found. Judges, state senators, businessmen, all of them invested in maintaining silence. Danielle stood at a press conference days later. The microphones were back, but her tone was sharper now. They tried to smear my husband, they tried to bury the truth, but we are not backing down. She held up a document. This is a list of 47 public officials involved in the cover-up, and we are suing all of them. The crowd roared, reporters screamed out questions. Protesters began forming a new wave of support. She was no longer just a victim. She was a force. But her rise had made her a target more dangerous than before. As the state scrambled to contain the backlash, one final figure emerged. The man who had built the original network of corruption. A retired colonel named Preston Blake. And he had one mission. Erase everything. Even if it meant doing the unthinkables. The rain poured that night like the heavens themselves were warning Danielle Parker. Thunder cracked over the city's skyline while she sat alone at her desk, eyes heavy with exhaustion. Her inbox was full. Her voicemail was packed. Her son was asleep upstairs, and Michael had fallen into a restless nap on the couch. Danielle had won a major battle, but she knew better now. This was no longer just a legal fight. This was survival. 300 miles away, in a remote cabin surrounded by pine trees, a black SUV pulled up on a gravel path. The man inside stepped out without an umbrella. He didn't need one. He had walked through rain and fire for 20 years in the shadows of America's most hidden programs. His name was Preston Blake. A retired colonel with eyes that never blinked and a voice that could cut glass. He had built the internal network of off-book law enforcement operatives that now stood exposed because of Danielle's courage. And now his mission was clear. Shut her down. Permanently. He stepped into the cabin where a handful of old allies waited. Men who had sworn loyalty to a cause not written in the Constitution, but whispered in rooms filled with smoke and secrets. Preston spoke without pause. We created the system to keep order, but she has ignited chaos. One of the men asked, "What's the plan?" Preston slid a folder across the table. Her husband is still the weak point. We cut him off, then we isolate her, and then she disappears. The men nodded. It had begun. Meanwhile, in Atlanta, Danielle was growing suspicious. Every time she left the house, she saw the same black sedan parked 2 blocks away. When she drove to pick up her son from school, she noticed a van that seemed to follow at a distance. One night, she found her trash cans overturned, nothing missing, just disturbed. Valerie came over and ran a Weep with a friend from her military days. They found a bug underneath Danielle's SUV. Someone was listening. Michael wanted to take their son and go stay with family in Texas. Danielle refused. She said, "If we run now, we send a message that they won, and I am not here to lose." She filed a report with the local police, but no action was taken. In fact, the next morning, 2 officers showed up at her door claiming to investigate a noise complaint. There had been no noise. Michael recorded the interaction. The officers left, clearly agitated that they couldn't provoke them. Then came the call. A restricted number, Danielle answered. A deep voice spoke only 5 words. "You should have stayed silent." The line went dead. Danielle's heart pounded, but she did not panic. She made one phone call. It was to Richard Calloway, her attorney. She said, "Activate the contingency file." He responded, "Already done, I knew they'd come." Calloway had a plan for just this moment. He had built a security web around Danielle's case, multiple digital copies, multiple news outlets, 3 whistleblowers ready to speak on camera if anything happened to her. What Preston Blake did not know was that Danielle had turned her defense into offense. But the colonel had other moves. 3 days later, Michael was arrested in public. No warning, no explanations. Danielle watched in horror as her husband was pulled from their driveway by 6 plainclothes officers. Her son screamed. She screamed. The neighbors watched in silence, unsure what was happening. The officers refused to state the charge. They simply said, "He's going away for a while." Danielle followed them to the local jails, but Michael had been rerouted to a federal holding facility without charges. Calloway got involved immediately, calling judges and pushing emergency motions. But Danielle could barely sleep. The silence of the house was now filled with fear. She sat at her desk, recording a video. It was not for YouTube, not for media. It was a message to the people who were trying to destroy her. She said, "I know what you are doing, and I will not break, I will not bow, I will not vanish." She sent it to 10 trusted allies and saved copies in multiple encrypted drives. That night, the black sedan moved 2 blocks closer. A drone buzzed by her window. Valerie came over with 2 security agents from her military network and stayed the night. The next morning, Danielle received a letter. No return address, just typed on plain white paper. It read, "This is your final chance, walk away or everything ends." She folded the paper and handed it to Valerie. Danielle said, "Let them come, I will be ready." Across town, Preston Blake loaded his pistol and checked his watch. He had planned wars overseas. Now he was planning one in his own country, against one woman. But what he didn't know was that she had just made her boldest move yet. She had just scheduled a live interview with a global news station. And she was about to name names. All of them. Live. And once the world heard what she had to say, there would be no turning back. The sun had barely risen when Danielle stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of her navy blazer. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were steady. Valerie stood behind her, arms folded, watching her like a soldier on guard. Today was the day the world would hear everything. At precisely 9 in the morning, a black SUV from the news network pulled up outside Danielle's house. A producer named Hannah stepped out, her face tight with nerves. She had done controversial interviews before, but nothing like this. Inside the vehicle, 2 cameras were already set, wired for a live stream that would beam Danielle's words across the world. Danielle stepped out of the house, clutching a folder of classified documents in one hand and a locket in the other. The locket held a picture of her and Michael on their wedding day. Her son waved from the front window. Valerie leaned over and whispered, "Do not let them rattle you. This is bigger than them now." Danielle nodded. 30 minutes later, she was seated in the back of the SUV, microphone clipped, lights on, satellite signal connected. The live countdown started flashing on the screen. 10 seconds to air. Hannah said quietly, "Are you sure about this?" Danielle replied, "I have never been more sure of anything in my life." The red light turned on, and the world watched. She began with a calm voice. "My name is Danielle Parker. I am a wife, a mother, a lawyer, and a victim of the same system I once believed in." She laid it out slowly, not in anger, but in chilling, unstoppable truth. She told them about the night she was dragged by police while pregnant. She explained how her husband, a sitting judge, had been arrested without cause. She revealed how a federal unit operating outside the law had stalked her, threatened her, and tried to silence her. She named names. High-level figures inside the Department of Homeland Security. Private contractors involved. Ved in black site operations. Federal judges who had turned a blind eye. Each name was backed by documents. The screen split into 2 as the producer displayed each piece of evidence in real time. Emails, signed memos, phone logs, everything. Danielle continued, "This is no longer just about me. This is about every woman who has been silenced, every black man who has been beaten, every child growing up wondering if the system is designed to protect or destroy." Within 20 minutes, the live stream had gone viral. Over 7 million viewers. Hashtags exploding across social media. Newsrooms in Los Angeles and New York halted broadcasts to air her feed. Inside the federal bunker where Preston Blake had been monitoring the situation, alarms blared. Staff scrambled to cut the satellite feed, but it was too late. The video was mirrored across thousands of servers. It could not be erased. Blake cursed under his breath. One of his men asked, "What now?" Blake replied coldly, "We move to final containment." He authorized a mission. 5 men. Plain clothes. No identification. Find her, detain her, and if necessary, disappear her. Back in Atlanta, the stream ended after 45 minutes. Danielle closed with these words, "I have risked everything because silence is no longer survival. It is complicity. I will not be complicit. And if something happens to me or my family, the world will already know why." The stream went dark. The SUV pulled away quickly, heading to a safe location coordinated by Valerie. They had less than 20 minutes before a response would come. Valerie drove. Danielle sat silent, staring out the window. She whispered. It's begun. 3 blocks behind them, a black van turned the same corner. Inside were men who had no names. Men who had erased people before. But this time they were being watched. Because as the live stream had gone viral, something unexpected happened. A group of retired federal agents who had once served with honor recognized the truth in Danielle's words. They had seen signs for years. Corruption, hidden operations, untraceable orders. And now one of their own had spoken. A man named Jacob Barnes, a former NSA investigator, picked up his phone and made a call. He said, "Mobilize everyone, she is not going to die like this." Within minutes, calls went out to former agents, military veterans, and even honest law enforcement officials. Danielle had become a symbol. And symbols are dangerous to those in power. The SUV pulled into a safe house owned by one of Valerie's oldest friends. Steel gates, security cameras, bulletproof glass. But no place is ever truly safe when your enemy controls the sky. A surveillance drone hovered above. Inside, Danielle spoke directly into a secured camera feed. She said, "If they come, we record everything. We go live again, we tell the world every single move they make." Michael's attorney called. Michael had been moved again. This time to a facility in Kansas. No charges filed. Just held. Danielle's voice cracked for the first time. "They are trying to break me." Valerie said, "Then we break them first." And that is when the knock came at the door. 3 hard pounds, followed by silence. Valerie drew her weapons. Danielle froze. This was it. The moment they had feared. But when the door opened, it was not the enemy. It was Jacob Barnes. And behind him were 6 former agents, fully armed and ready to fight for justice. Jacob said, "We believe you and we are here to protect you." Danielle collapsed into a chair, tears falling freely. She had told the truth. And finally, someone believed her enough to stand beside her. But Preston Blake was not done. And the next move he would make would change everything. Danielle sat in the corner of the safe house's dim living room, staring at the wall. Her hands were wrapped around a mug of lukewarm tea she had not touched. Jacob Barnes and the former federal agents took shifts checking the perimeter, scanning for drones, watching the sky. Valerie had not sat down since they arrived. She paced the floor, checking cameras, reinforcing locks, making silent calls to people she trusted. The weight in the room was thick. At precisely 2:16 in the afternoon, the signal dropped. All cameras went black. The Wi-Fi was cut. The cell towers in the area jammed. Jacob's walkie crackled with static and then died. He looked at Valerie and said 2 words. "They are coming. No sirens. No warning." Just silence, and then the world exploded. The front of the house blew inward with a shockwave that shattered every window. Tear gas canisters clattered across the floor. Flames licked up the curtains. Shouts echoed through the haze. Federal agents in black gear stormed the house with military precision. Danielle dropped to the floor coughing. Valerie pulled her behind the kitchen counter, shielding her with her own body. Jacob and the others returned fire. This was not an arrest. This was an execution order. Valerie shouted, "We need to move now." Jacob nodded and pointed to the back entrance. "Go, we will hold them." Danielle screamed, "No, not without you." Jacob looked at her with fierce eyes and said, You started this, you finish it, get to the public, that is the only way this ends. Valerie grabbed Danielle by the arm and dragged her toward the back door, coughing through the smoke. Behind them, the firefight intensified. Jacob fell to one knee, blood blooming on his shoulder, but he kept shooting. Every second they held the line bought Danielle a chance at survival. They burst through the back door into the alley. 2 black sedans were waiting. Valerie threw Danielle into one and jumped into the driver's seat of the other. The cars peeled out, tires screeching. Danielle's driver was a young man named Caleb, a former Marine. He said, "Buckle up, they will be right behind us." They drove fast through side streets, avoiding major roads. The goal was to reach a secondary safe location where an encrypted satellite uplink would allow Danielle to broadcast again. But the feds were prepared. A surveillance chopper picked them up 5 minutes later. Black SUVs boxed them in at the next intersection. Caleb slammed into reverse and spun down a side street. Valerie called over radio. "Split routes, I will draw the tail." She made a hard turn and sped toward the freeway, leading half the convoy away. Caleb took a sharp left and disappeared down a narrow underpass. Danielle could barely breathe. She said, "Is Jacob alive?" Caleb said nothing. Her silence was answer enough. Tears fell, but there was no time to mourn. 2 more blocks. A safe house disguised as a laundromat. They entered through the back. Inside was an old communications center from the Cold War era. Caleb activated the satellite uplink. Danielle sat in front of the camera. Her face was bruised, eyes red. But her voice was steel. She said, "They tried to kill me today. They killed Jacob Barnes, and they will kill more if we do not stop them. This is the moment we decide if we are a free country or just a playground for the powerful." The stream began. Live, worldwide, in multiple languages. The footage of the raid was uploaded and shown in real time. Danielle told the world what happened in Atlanta, what happened in Kansas, what happened in the shadows of a nation that claimed to stand for justice. People listened. Journalists picked it up. Senators began calling emergency meetings. But then came the unexpected blow. A broadcast from Preston Blake. He stood behind a podium with the seal of the Department of National Integrity. He said, "Danielle Parker is a fugitive. She is spreading false information. The footage is doctored. The agents involved in today's operation were killed by her armed accomplices. She is to be considered armed and extremely dangerous." Gasps filled newsrooms across America. The villain had flipped the script. But Danielle was ready. She had one more card to play. She reached into her bag and pulled out a USB drive. Inside was a recording. Michael's voice, in a secure government room, leaking details of a shadow project called Echohammer, an operation run without congressional approvals. The recording played. Michael said, "They run black sites in Kansas, Utah, and New Mexico. They experiment on people, they detain without cause, and they operate without oversight. I have seen the documents." Danielle stared into the camera and said, "Now ask yourself, who do you believe? The man trying to silence me or the judge who risked everything to protect the truth?" The feed ended, and the world changed again. Because within 10 minutes, the hashtag Justice for Danielle was trending #1 worldwide. 20 major media outlets demanded independent investigations. And one powerful senator named Rebecca Graham, once silent, issued a call for congressional hearings. The house had burned. The safe house was gone. But Danielle Parker's voice had survived the flames. And for the first time in weeks, she felt something real. A hope. But the war was not over. Because Preston Blake still had one weapon left. And he was preparing to use it. A weapon designed not to silence, but to erase. Preston Blake stood in his high-rise office overlooking Washington, D.C. The city shimmered in the late afternoon sun, but his eyes were fixed on a digital display on the wall. It showed a real-time heat map of the internet. Danielle Parker's video was spreading like wildfire. He turned to the man standing behind him, a man in a charcoal suit with no name and no badge. Preston asked, "How bad is it?" The man said, 70 million views in the last 4 hours, trending in 42 countries. We lost control of the narrative. Preston clenched his jaw. She should have been erased in that raid. The man replied, "There is one more option, the Echohammer Protocol, Phase 4. Preston paused, then slowly nodded. "Activate it. If she wants war, we will give her one." The nameless agent walked out without another word. Across the city, inside a secret cyber operations hub buried beneath the Pentagon, Echohammer Phase 4 was launched. The goal was simple. Erase Danielle Parker. Not kill her. Not arrest her. Erase her. Her bank accounts froze. Her birth certificate flagged invalid. Her driver's license revoked. Her hospital records wiped. Every photo, article, school document, even her college yearbook was digitally erased. By the time the system completed its purge, Danielle Parker would not exist. Inside the old laundromat, Caleb stared at the computer screen. His face turned pale. Danielle walked over and asked, "What is it?" Caleb whispered, "They are ghosting you, digital wipe. Your online life is disappearing piece by piece. I have never seen anything move this fast." Danielle took a deep breath. "They think I need a digital record to prove I am real, but they forgot I have something stronger, people." Valerie, now back from her diversion, stormed in with a box in her arms. Inside were hard drives, paper files, photos. She dropped it on the table and said, "Everything Jacob collected on Echohammer. Names, dates, signatures, you are going to need this." Danielle opened the box and froze. On top of the files was a small video recorder. She pressed play. Jacob appeared on screen. He said, "If you are seeing this, it means I did not make it. And it means you did, good, because the truth needs you now more than ever. What you are holding is proof that the entire Echohammer operation was authorized by Preston Blake under a fake task force charter. Get this to the public, and finish what we started." Danielle's hands trembled, but she did not cry. She turned to Caleb and Valerie. "Let us end this." Valerie said, "I have a contact in New York. A network anchor willing to take the story live without cuts. If we move now, we can be on air before they shut down another line." They packed the box, drove a nondescript van through state highways, and dodged surveillance drones. It took 11 hours. But at 4:38 the next morning, Danielle sat in a makeup chair at Channel 7 News in Manhattan. The anchor, a sharp-witted black woman named Tanya Rogers, greeted her with a hug. She said, "They tried to erase you, but now the world will know." The interview aired live. No delay. No script. Danielle walked the world through everything. The illegal raids. The federal silencing machine. The death of Jacob Barnes. The black sites. Michael's recordings. The camera cut to the hard evidence laid out on the table in front of her. The files. The memos. The audio logs. There was no room for denial. Social media exploded. Senators who once ignored Danielle now called for emergency hearings. The Justice Department announced an investigation into the Department of National Integrity. And Preston Blake, he did not sleep. He stood alone in his office watching his legacy collapse. He called his assistant and said, "Get the plane ready." But it was too late. As he stepped into the elevator to flee the building, a team of federal marshals met him at the lobby. The lead marshal handed him a warrant and said, "You are under arrest for conspiracy against the United States." Preston said nothing, just stared out the window as they put the cuffs on. Danielle was watching the broadcast in a quiet hotel room with Valerie and Caleb. The three of them sat in silence. Then Danielle whispered, "We did it." Caleb said, "No, you did it." Valerie said, "And now what?" Danielle looked out the window. Morning light breaking through the clouds. She said, "Now we make sure they never forget who tried to silence the truth." Danielle Parker sat in a quiet holding room just outside the congressional chamber. The cold air from the vents hummed above her. She wore a navy blue suit and had her hair pulled back. No makeup, no earrings, just clarity in her eyes. This was not about appearances anymore. It was about accountability. Valerie adjusted her collar. "Are you ready?" Danielle said, "I have been ready since the day they dragged me out of that parking lot." A government official opened the door and motioned her forward. It was time. Danielle stepped into the grand hearing room of the United States Congress. Cameras flashed, reporters jostled for position. Elected officials whispered to one another as she approached the witness table. All eyes locked on her. Senator Richard Haverson, chairman of the Oversight Committee, cleared his throat and said, "Miss Parker, you have the floor." Danielle adjusted the mic and took a slow breath. She began. "My name is Danielle Parker. I am a nurse. I am a wife. And I am a Black American who was dragged to the ground in front of her family by men who swore to serve and protect." The room was silent. She continued. "They said I fit a description. They said I was resisting. They said my husband was lying when he showed his badge. But what they really meant was they never expected someone like me to fight back. They never expected someone like me to have a voice." She paused, then added, "And they never expected that voice to reach this room." The senators leaned forward. The audience was captivated. Danielle told them everything. How the arrest turned into a disappearance. How she was shuffled between secret detention centers with no records. How the agents threatened her unborn child. How she survived with the help of whistleblowers, Jacob's sacrifice, and Michael's bravery. She told them about Echohammer, the digital purging, the evidence, the cover-up, and finally she laid out the full chain of command. From Preston Blake down to the agents who slammed her onto the asphalt. The committee members looked stunned, some looked ashamed. Senator Haverson leaned forward again and asked, "Miss Parker, what do you want from this committee?" Danielle did not hesitate. "I want justice." He asked, "And what does justice look like to you?" Danielle said, "I want names released. I want every Black site shut down. I want federal oversight on law enforcement data systems. I want people to know what was done in their name." She added, "And I want my record cleared, my name restored, my life back." The hearing went on for 4 hours. The public watched in real time. Commentators called it the most powerful testimony in modern American history. By nightfall, Congress passed a motion to launch an independent task force with full subpoena power. But Danielle's fight was not done. That evening, she received a visitor. A quiet man in a dark overcoat. He introduced himself as Elijah Mathers, former National Security Advisor, quietly retired after refusing to sign off on a prior Echohammer initiative. He handed Danielle a thumb drive. Oh, he said, "This has the real list, not just names, but the internal communications, the deals, the cover stories, everything." Danielle asked, "Why now?" Elijah replied, "Because you did what I could not, you did not stay silent, that deserves support." Danielle held the drive in her hand. It felt heavier than it should have. She looked at Valerie. "What do I do with this?" Valerie replied, "You already know the answer." Danielle called Tanya Rogers from Channel 7. Told her there was one more story. One last interview. The next night, Danielle sat across from Tanya once again. The footage played in the background. Emails from high-ranking officials discussing secret operations. A message thread where one agent bragged about detaining a black pastor and altering his travel records to trap him on a no-fly list. Danielle looked into the camera and said, "They built a system to bury the truth, we just dug it up." A social media erupted again. But this time it was not just outrage. It was action. Peaceful marches returned to city streets. Black churches held forums with local law enforcement. High school students recited Danielle's testimony in civics class. And for the first time in a long time, change felt possible. Danielle stood outside the courthouse weeks later with Michael. He had taken leave from his job to support her full-time. She asked, "Do you think it is over?" Michael smiled softly and said, "No, but we are not running anymore." Danielle squeezed his hand, then looked out toward the Capitol dome in the distance, and whispered, "Let them come." It was a clear spring morning when the country came to a standstill. All eyes were fixed on the courthouse in Washington, D.C. Inside, the federal courtroom was packed with senators, journalists, activists, and victims. On trial were three of the most powerful men in law enforcement: Preston Blake, former National Security Director; Raymond Knox, data suppression architect; and Eugene Tucker, head of illegal detention operations. Danielle Parker sat in the front row, flanked by Michael and Valerie. She held her hands together tightly. No tears, no emotion, just determination. The judge entered. The courtroom rose. Judge Wilkins, known for his stern but fair approach, called the court to order. He looked directly at the jury foreperson and asked for the verdict. The room went silent. The foreperson stood. "In the case of the United States versus Preston Blake, we the jury find the defendant guilty on all counts." A gasp spread through the courtroom. "In the case of the United States versus Raymond Knox, we the jury find the defendant guilty on all counts." Murmurs grew louder. "In the case of the United States versus Eugene Tucker, we the jury find the defendant guilty on all counts." The courtroom erupted, reporters scrambled to send headlines. Activists in the back row wept, officers bowed their heads, but Danielle sat still, not out of disbelief, but out of resolve. This was only the beginning. Judge Wilkins raised his gavel and spoke. "Sentencing will be swift. These crimes represent one of the darkest abuses of power this court has ever seen, and they will be punished accordingly." Michael leaned over and whispered, "It is done." Danielle replied softly, "No, now it begins." Later that day, President Mitchell held a national address. She spoke clearly and firmly. "What happened to Danielle Parker should never have happened to any American. Our justice system failed her. Our systems of Power failed her, but she did not fail us. She reminded us what courage looks like, what truth sounds like. She announced a sweeping reform package. The Danielle Parker Federal Protections Act. It abolished no-record detention sites. It established strict controls on predictive surveillance systems. It funded civil rights investigations in every state. And it created a federal database of police misconduct accessible to the public. The nation reacted with a mix of hope and relief. Schools began teaching about digital justice. Danielle was honored by civil rights foundations, health institutions, and universities. But she declined all speaking offers, all book deals, all press tour. Instead, she returned to her community, opened a small clinic in the same neighborhood where she once grew up, named it after her grandmother's, Nurse Lillian's House of Care, and she went back to doing what she always loved, helping people, healing people, holding hands with women in labor, reading charts in quiet hallways, smiling at children in waiting rooms. The spotlight faded, but her legacy only grew. One afternoon, a little girl approached her in the clinic hallway and said, "Are you the lady on TV who changed the world?" Danielle knelt and said, "No, sweetie, I am the lady who changed her part of it. You will do the rest." The girl grinned and hugged her. Outside, the sun was shining. Danielle walked out of the clinic, hand in hand with Michael, now her husband and the father of their two beautiful children. She looked up at the sky. No helicopters. No fear. Only peace.